ES Audio.
You know, we do quite a lot of drama on how to be a CEO. It's a roller coaster life being an entrepreneur. But there is another side to it. Like being able to build your own 850-acre estate in the Cotswolds.
I wanted a life for my children outside of London, but I had a job in London and I had a necessity to be in London. So I created this idea of finding a site that was close enough to London that people could get there on a Friday night and back on a Sunday. And you got a huge, as much of a sense as you possibly can of living in the country.
John Hitchcox is the founder and chairman of You, a global real estate and development company and the world's largest non-hotel residential brand. We're going to be hanging out at their Lakes estate about 90 minutes from London. It's a very peaceful place where residents can retreat to their timber and glass second homes with interiors by people like Kelly Hoppen and Jade Jagger. Or you could just sit by the water and watch the world go by. But in John's world, there's an awful lot to see. Like the £1.3 billion regeneration of Olympia in London.
And I've been involved in the rejuvenation of many parts of London and many parts of other cities around the world over the last 40 years. You know, we had this great renaissance through that period of the early 90s, and I feel like we're at the beginning of another one of those.
I'm David Marsden from the Evening Standard. We're also going to be talking about how to survive a financial crisis, and John has seen a few. But the Lakes is such a very nice place. Let's take a look around.
We've got a beautiful, beautiful autumnal day.
It is absolutely beautiful here. You've got all the yellow and brown leaves coming down right next to the fishing lake here. What fish are in there?
This is all stocked with trout, and we've got a lot of pike.
And on the banks there, are these some of the apartments, the houses?
These are all the houses. All the houses sit over the water side, so you've got this sort of high level of tranquility, and they all look out across these lakes. We have 11 huge lakes, and the biggest one's about 280 acres.
So we're here at the lake, sitting by the lake with all of these lovely homes effectively right in front of us here. This didn't exist 20 years ago, did it?
No, it didn't. I mean, it was a really interesting evolution, this, because it was inspired out of need, which is actually, I mean, if we're talking about entrepreneurship and CEO-ness and all of these sorts of things, you know, I think similar to so many, I kind of had a huge fascination with wanting to do business, I think, as a kid, and read lots and lots of autobiographies. In fact, my two big educational moments were being a paper boy and reading every single paper that was sat in front of me. My paper round started in the village and went through a council estate, then progressed from the council estate to the sort of Guardian readers, to the Observer readers, and then all the way out to the Times and Telegraph readers. So during the week I got a full spectrum of everything from the red tops to the broadsheets. And then, you know, later in life, everything I do and have done has been inspired by things that I need and want. And this was one of those. So, right, we're back in the car, we opened the gate, we're on the meadow. Essentially, this was a brownfield site. You know, we were bringing a gravel pit back to use. And we've been very flattered by the fact that it's now being designated a site of special scientific interest, which is probably one of the highest sort of environmental accolades you can have.
Yeah, I mean, was that a goal at the time? Did you go, we're going to make something so nice the animals come back?
Yes, no, we've spent a huge amount of time on the whole biodiversity and the whole, I mean, we've got there's more animal and plant species here than there ever were before when it was a bunch of farmers' fields. We've got the bat species is extraordinary. We've got monjacks. We have a whole farm. I wanted a life for my children outside of London, but I had a job in London, and I had a necessity to be in London. So I tried the moving out to the country, but you know, you find yourself sort of isolated in a way without, you know, much of a social environment, and also slightly at a limb because you don't have that much in common with all the people that are local that you do meet, and you tended to meet back in those days. You met them in the pub, so I created this idea of finding a site that was close enough to London that people could get there on a Friday night and back on a Sunday, and then build a number of homes that you could come down here for the weekends. It was lock up and go. It was very easy, and there was a lot of activities, and you got a huge, as much of a sense as you possibly can of living in the country. And now we're going through to the bird hide now, which we use as a kids club, which is all part of the sort of kids entertainment. It's lovely because there's a lot of activities that go on, but because the site's so large, you're not feeling like there's lots and lots of people here. But we're here on half term and we're packed.
Yeah, I mean, but it's got that kind of rural feel to it, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it's super satisfying. For me, it's super satisfying because it's been March 1999 I first came down here, so we're 24 years away, 24 years of work, and to see it so active now and all having come together, it's quite different from everything else. I didn't realise it was going to quite be on this scale.
No, I was going to ask. I mean, this was a gravel pit, but when you came to this site, did you go, "Oh, I can see lakes here and buildings here and a beehive over here"?
Yes, and somehow you don't really. I mean, if you describe this as a gravel pit, and if I told you this is a gravel pit now, it certainly doesn't look like one. So it's quite difficult because you could either describe it as being, the lakes, which is what it is. I mean, it's 11 huge lakes, and it's covered in fertile ground with trees and everything now. So you'd never recognise it, but. Yeah, that was the vision, and that was the need, and people. When I talked to people about this idea, they all thought I was bonkers. And then a couple of my friends got it, and then the thing started to roll, and then we built 4 houses, and we launched in 2006, 2007, which of course was super hairy because we launched straight into. We all learned the name Lehman Banks then, didn't we? Which was that was when banks were going bust. There was the good bank and bad bank, and we're actually a victim of that. And we ended up taking this site over and having to run it all from cash for many years.
Really, that's extraordinary.
Because yes, one of our bank we banked this originally with Anglo-Irish Bank, and they went bust on us.
Yeah.
So we had to actually finance them out, which was extraordinary because to think in your career that I've been through six recessions now in my life. But what was interesting here about this project is that it was the ability to identify other people that had exactly the same kind of idea as I did, that wanted to come down here, and you can see them all today. There's 160 families here now that want an environment for their kids that has the same need as I did. Through that very difficult time in 2006, 2007, 2008, those people still had the same needs. So we actually had some momentum through these difficult times. So here we're just over here on the left. We have a sort of trials motorbike track, which is for the older crew. And then we have an arboretum which we planted. It's actually my wife and my wedding, where all our friends gave us a tree. And here you can see 294 trees, which show how long I've been married. Because that one in front of us, it must be at least 25, 30 feet tall. We're just passing a Yoshitomo Nara dog, called Your Dog, which is part of our sculpture park, which is Nara's a very big Japanese artist.
This is a giant white, I guess it's kind of like a Snoopy-like type of dog. Big question, how do you survive a recession?
I think you got to maintain cash flow. I mean, cash flow's got to be the big thing to focus on, for sure. The crystal ball is very, very hazy at the moment, and I think if you go back to very basic economics, when you start printing money, you will get inflation. And if you get inflation, in order to control inflation, you will have to put interest rates up. If you've printed lots of money and borrowed lots of money that you'll pay back as inflation grows, the banks will have to pay back less, or the country will have to pay back less to the banks. So that's a good bit of news in a way, but we're midway through that period of time. I think to some extent there's a lot of press fear that's going on at the moment. I think we're at the back end of the supply chain issue, which is where during the pandemic so many people went home to wherever they lived. The UK suffered more than most because of Brexit. We'd actually asked everybody that had come from another country to go home and not come back. So we're probably experiencing a worse side of this than the rest of the world. But the supply chain issues will come back, and I think we're in the next year or two that will ease a lot. I think there's a little bit of an upside to what's happening immediately now, which is that all of this political fiasco that we're going through is probably frightened everyone, from everyone at home who was worried about their mortgage, everyone who runs a business who's borrowing money and who's worrying about where their next trade's going to come from. And that to a certain extent will actually compress the recession, I think, because it's accelerated it, and so I think we're going to come through it quicker, which is in a way an advantage, but a big disadvantage to those that are really suffering in this part, and have also been suffering from the back end of the pandemic.
Well, yeah, of course, coming off the pandemic. I mean, I can think of worse places to be in lockdown than here. Were you here at the time, John?
We were packed in lockdown. Yeah, we became something of a fantastic retreat. I think we had 120 of the 160 houses were occupied. The rental program which we run here was full, and today it's still doing very, very well. But we've got other businesses within our portfolio that didn't have suffer, or should I say, didn't have such a fortuitous time during lockdown. Over there we have a farm. We have pigs and sheep and goats, and then we have vegetables and chickens, and we put the eggs and all of the vegetables and all of the product at the front gate. It's funny, during lockdown there was literally the eggs arrived at midday at the gate, and there was a queue of people standing waiting for I think we produce about 60 to 80 eggs a day, and all of the owners were there sitting waiting for their eggs. And we do the same with the vegetables as well. Oh, here we go, we're driving past the tennis courts. You could play tennis, you could lock yourself in your house, write your book, have a dreamy view across these beautiful lakes, let your kids out into a sort of very safe environment, and they would be, they'd have a great opportunity to learn about the country and just play and just generally have fun.
Right, I'm going for a stroll. While I wander, why not hit the follow button on your podcast provider so you never miss an episode of How to Be a CEO. I'll be back in a couple of minutes. Here's some ads to keep you company. I wasn't going to use this as the hook to talk about your new Olympia project, but obviously, what is it with you launching projects during times of financial turmoil? John, why are you choosing now?
I'd beg to say that's a coincidence and perhaps a misunderstanding, because our U business, which is in 46 countries, that we're launching 2 or 3 or 4 projects a year. So there is a continuity to the launch of projects, and obviously when you do that kind of volume, you're going to launch some of them into a poor market. And secondly, I'd say that Olympia's been an extraordinary story, and is likely, because of the scale of it, to run through the complete economic cycle once or twice, and it has done throughout its life. When we acquired the site about 4 years ago, we really looked at it as being, let's embrace all that the UK, but all that Olympia has to offer the world, and let's try to embellish that. rather than flatten the site and create a kind of housing development, which was, I think in the way that people had looked at Earl's Court, we looked at this in a different way, which is let's try and embrace this. And we went out and communicated. We had 63 days of public consultation with everyone from the leaders of the country to the leaders of London through to our next door neighbours. We consulted with them all, and our pitch, our vision was let's really make events, entertainment the theme behind this, and bring culture and as much as we can to the site. And we've signed up with 2 hotels. One's with a Hyatt hotel, one's with Citizen M. These will allow people to stay there. We've signed with, as you probably know, Weatherby Performing Arts School, which is a sort of merger, an idea that I really had, which was to bring the Brits School together with a private school to create the fame at school, and so we're delighted to do that. We're building a new theatre, which Trafalgar Entertainment will be running. We're building a new music venue for 4,500, 5,000 capacity, which AEG will be running. AEG is one of the big players in the world. They run the O2. And we're now bringing forward a large number of restaurants, so we'll be able to feed everybody that comes to the site, and we will ultimately have about 10 million visitors a year. We're very lucky because London is the most extraordinary city in the world, and we're in the centre of that.
I do feel if there was one consequence of the pandemic and lockdown, it's when things opened up again. And people really appreciated live events again, didn't they? They wanted to go out. They wanted to go out and see things, meet people, go to restaurants, that kind of thing. Have you felt that?
I mean, it's been interesting because we were talking earlier, and I listened to your lovely show with Des Gunnar yesterday. We were involved in the early renaissance of the restaurant industry when we built Mezzo, which I think was the largest restaurant in London at the time, in Soho. And Soho was dead before then. And I've been involved in the rejuvenation of many parts of London and many parts of other cities around the world over the last 40 years. We had this great renaissance through that period of the early 90s of the restaurant culture. Yeah. And I feel like we're at the beginning of another one of those. And it's horrible to say that the causes of these, unfortunately, is the kind of pressure that, in this particular case, that the pandemic caused on the hospitality, the events and entertainment industry, and as you say, the byproduct of that is the frustration of the visitors because they can't go out. And so the moment they can go out, they all want to go out to restaurants, they all want to go out to shows. I mean, I've got, Simon le Bon, who's just buying here. He's a great friend. He's just been on tour, and they're having massive tours around the world because everyone wants to go out and do and see and be with people and have this sort of this human connection again. And I think we're at the beginning of a new restaurant renaissance. In London. And the thing about London in particular, London, there's 300 or 400 shows a night.
Yeah.
There's no other city in the world that has that kind of volume. And when you go out, generally when you go out to eat, you go out to participate in that urban city living. And it feels to me like that's back, and I think we will have that, and through all of the blur of the politics and the economics and all of this, we're very lucky because we have a city in London which has got a momentum and soul of its own that's been going on for centuries, and that's a juggernaut that you can't term with idle economics. I don't know. Sorry, idle's not the right word. I was going for a word, but without trying to be too controversial.
I do wonder, though, you created the lakes for your kids, effectively. It became a bit bigger than that. I know that we spoke earlier about your love of music and of live performance. Is what you're doing with Olympia part of that as well, wanting to get in and be behind that live scene as well as being someone who goes to it?
I'm trying to work that out myself. Is the answer to that question? It's quite interesting, because I was one of my father was an architect, and my mother was I think her parents wanted her to be a musician, and she was quite talented but didn't. She ended up becoming a physician, and But she really wanted one of her 5 children to be a musician, and I was number 2, so I got pushed to play the violin, the piano, the clarinet, and I was basically not very good at any of them. And so there used to be, it's a little bit like the DJ today, it used to be, if you weren't very good at musical instruments, make him the conductor. So I got pushed off to learn how to be a conductor, which is quite interesting because now I feel a little bit like I am the conductor, but I conduct a different orchestra. I conduct an orchestra of businesses, and but along the way, what it did was it allowed me in a way, and then I went to a Steiner school as well, which was a sort of it's a very soft educational system where you do get lots of arts, theatre and music, etc. And probably I wanted to be an entrepreneur, so I probably would have been an accountant or something if I'd been to another school. But the upshot of all this was that I communicate with musicians and I communicate with artists, and I want to be a musician. So my role seems to have been in life to manage their world. And no, did it excite me to get involved in Olympia, and does it excite me to get involved in all of these activities? Yeah, absolutely. And does my friendship group being successful musicians? Absolutely, I love it. And so the answer to that has been slightly, evolutionary in a way. It's been, those are the guys that I've been hanging out with. That's the guys that but to become a conductor, I spent a lot of time sitting in the pits next to a conductor, turning pages. and it was quite a practical sort of skill set. I mean, I hated it. By the time I was 17, 18, that was it. I wasn't doing that. No, I didn't hate it. It was not something that I was it was not something that I pursued particularly, but it was interesting how it's manifested itself subconsciously in my life.
Yeah. I guess with all that being said, I kind of have to ask the question: have you and Simon le Bon ever been to the karaoke together?
Lots. Yeah, lots. We played. I mean, he thinks I can't count, which is absolutely right. Back to my original thing. Yeah, absolutely. We played lots together. Yes. Yes, I've been very lucky to play with some great musicians and love all that. I think that's partly because a friend of mine said that these musicians would love to be, real estate developers or something else, and these real estate developers would love to be musicians, and so they get pushed together.
That was John Hitchcox from You. For more news, interviews and the best analysis, head to standard.co.uk/business or pick up the Evening Standard newspaper. How to Be a CEO drops first thing every Monday morning. I'd love to see you again then.